All right, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're thrilled to have a packed house, standing room only. And I think that speaks a lot to the pressing issue that we're talking about today. We hear AI and we think about so many different things. And so we wanted to really hone in on a very particular use case for AI and machine learning today, and that's its impacts on ED operations. So we've actually brought together three interest groups and committees from SAEM. My name's Nick Stark. I'm an emergency physician based out of UCSF and Merced, California, and I'm representing us from the Innovation Interest Group. I'll pass it around to my colleagues.
I'm Moira Smith, so I'm the informatics faculty at the University of Virginia. I am the chair of the Informatics, Data Science, and Artificial Intelligence Interest Group. We are meeting at 10 a.m. on Friday. Welcome anybody with interest.
It's a nice plug, Moira. Brandon Allen, University of Florida. A lot of operational hats that I've held over the years, including vice chair of operations. I run our observation unit now and our program director for our fellowship and administration. Really excited to have this panel to really share a lot about how we can utilize AI for operations and efficiencies. So big thank you to them as well. And I guess we'll get started.
Yeah. And we'll hear a little bit more from Joe Gannett here in a moment as well. He got an upgrade to panelist last minute. So our objectives for this session, what are you going to leave here with? We want you to be able to analyze current and potential impacts of AI on ED ops, evaluate the effectiveness of AI-driven tools in optimizing care and operations, identify some key challenges and opportunities in integrating AI into our existing ED workflows, formulate some strategies for incorporating AI into ED ops, and finally, we'll also touch on some ethical and logistical considerations. Ultimately, we want you to have a deeper understanding of how AI is reshaping ED operations. We have four excellent experts to guide us through this journey today, and I'll let Moira briefly introduce them, and then they'll talk themselves as well.
So on our panel, starting with Dr. Ben Slovis, he is the CMIO at Temple. We also have Dr. Alan Cherney, ED Medical Director at Thomas Jefferson, and Dr. Rebecca Urban, who is the Vice President of Operations at Thomas Jefferson, and Dr. Joe Gannett, the Assistant Medical Director of Patient Flow at Los Angeles General. And again, I'll let them kind of delve deeper into their work as they are kind of presenting this information.
So we'll start off with Dr. Slovis. If you want to give a brief intro to yourself, your role, the background that you're bringing to this conversation. After that, we'll pass it over to Dr. Cherney and Rebecca. They've got some slides to share.
So hi, everybody. Thanks for coming today and hearing us talk. My name is Ben Slovis. I'm an emergency physician and fellowship-trained, board-certified clinical informaticist. I am currently the Chief Medical Informatics Officer at Temple Health, which is a regional health system right here in Philadelphia. With regards to emergency department AI, it's a really interesting application because now my current role, I'm looking really at AI applications across the health system. But when we consider operational AI and the role that it plays, it always comes down to how it impacts the emergency department. I think everyone can agree that throughput metrics with regards to how we're going to get patients up into their bed and out of the hospital as efficiently and safely as possible with the highest quality of care is on everyone's mind, and it all trickles down to the ED. So from the standpoint of what we've been working on over the last year or so, we've been looking at predictive models, both from the clinical standpoint of improving our accuracy of clinical diagnosis, as well as our throughput process with identifying patients and barriers for their throughput, both from the emergency department up to their bed, through their care continuum, and then out of the hospital. And then also looking at efficiency within the individual practice environment. So looking at things like ambient notes to improve quality and the practice of medicine, both in the emergency department and in the ambulatory context. We're also looking at process improvement overall with regards to staffing and things like that. So a lot of applications for AI in the health system.
Thanks, Dr. Slovis. And then Dr. Cherney and Rebecca, I have your slides too, so we can advance through those.
Okay, great. All right. So Got it. I think one more. Okay. So we at least started out with a more limited use of AI, and you can go to the next slide. So again, I'm Alan Cherney. I'm the medical director here at Jefferson. I took over this position last February, and actually got approached by our AI provider about how they could be useful to us. And so that's kind of how we're going to talk. What we're going to talk about today, and how we leverage that. And then Becca came on with us in December, and she's been a very big advocate for using this to help model capacity for hospital transfers. So our main campus is just about 4 or 5 blocks south of here in Center City. But like many of the places you're coming from, we have ridiculous challenges with boarding as a major referral academic center. So we have an affiliate campus about 2 miles south down the road in South Philadelphia called Methodist Hospital, which is fully part of the Jefferson system. And we send a lot of patients there every month directly admitted from the main ED to the affiliate floors and now even the ICU. And we wanted to figure out how far we could push that envelope basically in terms of getting patients there. So you can go to the next slide. So, we were basically doing this as a boarding reduction initiative to get patients out of the ED sooner. And we were talking about how JMH is Methodist, Jefferson Methodist Hospital. And we're talking about, okay, well, if we staff this many beds on the floor, how many patients a month can we send, and how many boarders does that get us in terms of reduction throughout the week? And we'll get more into this as we do the questions. You can keep going. Across both sites, right? So we open more beds, we can do more transfers, we can reduce boarding, and hopefully improve our throughput.
Yeah, Becca Urban, I will help you explain how do you explain this to your administrator and your C-suite in order to get funding for AI, rather than your pesky administrators constantly coming to you about your KPIs and you're left without being seen. The use of AI is highly critical in being able to tell that message. And so when you look at our bed availability, part of this is the constant really being able to look at where are opportunities and how do you move things. Some of these become really political conversations among your hospital. How do you push hospital medicine and social work to move patients around, but also to take advantage of the opportunities that are currently existing. Very few hospitals are building higher towers moving forward. And so really being able to maximize your opportunities, you need AI to assist. Next slide. So just going off from what Alan mentioned, so these are our transfers that we've done each month. You will see it has really made a lot of progress overall, that we're shifting anywhere from 185 up to the 200 patients from PGUH a couple blocks over to Methodist every single day directly into the hospital, and making sure, again, that patients are getting the highest level of care as quickly as possible. When you're looking at your observed benefits, really being able to see the opportunities, the efficient usage of beds, and also being able to convert here in the Philadelphia area and among other areas, really looking at, as hospital closures have occurred, how can you take on that additional volume that is occurring? It would take us weeks and months in order to find out how to look at that volume and where we would find a space, rather than just saying yes to everything, really being able to look at that and having a throughput plan. Last thing is really being able to look at our stakeholder buy-in. In order to have a conversations as an administrator with a clinician, if I don't bring data, my conversation is pretty much pointless. And at the same point, being able to bring that to your administrative level to get funding for these opportunities really needs to have that buy-in. So being able to come together and have all stakeholders at the table remains highly critical. And just kind of our next steps on this is really being able to look at our opportunities across our hospitals. We're also using it across other service lines as we move service lines from one facility to another, looking at what our bed capacity is. I probably use this tool about once a week, looking at different modeling opportunities, whether it's for ED, orthopedics, hospital medicine, any other different areas, but it has been highly critical on the ED standpoint.
Great. Thank you so much. I'll now pass it over to Dr. Gannett to give a little bit of his background as we head into our moderated conversation.
Hey everyone, my name's Joe Gannett. I'm the Assistant Medical Director of Patient Flow at LA General, previously LA County USC. Well, I went from being the moderator to a panelist, so quite the change of scenery from where I thought I was going to be. But I've been doing this job for 6 months, and I'm essentially do bed management for the county, including working our transfer center. And I'll tell you, I work for a board of supervisors. They want metrics. They want me to hit CMS star ratings. They want leapfrog. They couldn't care less about how I get there. I use AI to tell stories to convince people of what we need to do to help create bed opportunities in the ED. And a lot of what I'm doing is complex discharge rounds, working with SNFs, automating Teams messages in order to get our nurses handoff, and like, how do I engage frontline staff in order to create standardized operating procedures? And I essentially use AI on a daily basis to do that, because DHS is very against AI. So I'm actually a little bit of a rogue partner within that. But the reason I'm using AI is to show like my EVS bed turnaround times, this lost bedtime that sits at LA General that we haven't been able to pick out. I can do that data mining in about 2 hours and show a report that otherwise would have taken months for another administrator. So my real goal in AI is, how do I get dashboards, get people in standardized operating plans? I had people who weren't even reading my reports, and I made AI music for them to be educated on a dashboard that took me 3 months that shows you my bed movement. And even then, I realized through engagement, you kind of change the picture. They're used, they hate getting those newsletters. This is our new operating procedure. But if you make it into a podcast, you make it more engaging, people start reading it and being more engaged in your operational change. And so I would say for me, I'm mainly using AI as a culture changer and a way to standardize communications across our hospital.
Excellent. Well, as you can see, we have a huge breadth of experience with these panelists here. And one thing we were working on as our interest groups and committees came together to put together this didactic, it's a little overwhelming to think about AI, its applications to the clinical context. And so we wanted to get these perspectives up here that really specifically focus on how can we leverage AI within the operations realm. And I think we've got a lot to learn, and we're excited to have a conversation with you all today. As questions come up, we will have some time for questions as the session goes on, so definitely be thinking about something that you'd like to ask. I think as we get started, I'd like to pose a question to you, Dr. Gannett, really thinking about how do we define success in ED operations? Really zooming out from the AI applications for a moment and just thinking about what should we be building toward when we're leveraging AI in this context.
Yeah, I think as I kind of started off, a lot of us are being pushed through metrics. And then when you talk about patient flow, and if any of you have ever been to conference on it, they always are like, right patient, right care, right time. And then your administrator tells that to you and you're like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean to you? And it's saying, when I have an ICU patient, that patient better leave the ED within 50 minutes. Like, I want them to be at the right level of care. And when they're downgraded, I need a step down bed. I need a tele bed. And the idea that we can reduce all these delays and times, because we feel that as EM providers. But I think that if you look at Leapfrog, Vizient, all these companies are not measuring that, because they're just measuring what's available. And so, CMS star rating for me, ED length of stay for discharge patients. Well, I work with hospitalists, and I'm telling them, I run a trauma center where I have one CT scanner for 130,000 visits and some of the highest acuity. That's going to be your rate limiting step. We can talk about length of stay for discharges, but unless I eliminate boarding and I create other systems, AI, I don't need to tell that, but AI does help provide data that then can tell a story using queuing theory, something that, like, I do not have the aptitude. I'm not an informaticist, but I can use ways of convincing people. And I think AI takes down that barrier. It was like, I now have a data analyst that DHS wouldn't give me because I know how to build these things. So the future is, how do we define patients being at the right place at the right time? And how do we change acuity? But there's a lot of other levers that I think AI helps with, but the bureaucracy of contracts and how our nurses work is something that is outside of the ED's control, but is how AI can hopefully leverage how we have more predictive demand capacity matching.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. It's great stuff. And you might have a future in radio producing and with your music. Let him share it to you later. It's actually pretty incredible what he's sharing with the leadership group. My question is actually for Becca and Alan, and it's about how you guys are actively using AI in ED operations, and how that's really, what are the most clear-cut wins that you guys have had, and then some barriers that you've experienced, kind of those pearls and pitfalls of what you guys have already implemented.
Yeah, so as I alluded to earlier, when I took over, we were transferring about, 80 patients a month to our Methodist campus. And I really, when our AI provider approached us, I really wanted to get a sense of, like, well, what's the limit on this? Like, we're boarding, at that time, we were boarding 60 patients in a 54-bed emergency department. and so everybody's in chairs with IV poles, and it's like, how do we leverage this to increase our throughput and capacity here to take care of the 200 people who are walking in the door every day? So we did some modeling as we showed you, and the answer was that we could probably get over 200 if we optimize this correctly. And as you saw, we achieved that within about 8 or 9 months after engaging the group. And so what does that involve? Well, we bring that data to our transfer center, bed management, transportation leadership, and say, hey, we've got capacity to double this or even more right now. We need more crews dedicated to this. So then we got a dedicated crew 12 hours a day for transfers to take the transfers up and down the street. Because as you can imagine, 6 or 7 rides a day, even though it's only a 10-minute ride, you got to pick the patient up, you got to get them in the room. The whole transport takes time. So we have a dedicated truck 12 hours a day, 7 days a week now. I've now roped in, as we've scaled this up, hospital medicine and pulmonary critical care to actually provide transitional care for these patients while they await departure. So we're not the ones taking care of them in the ED, and therefore they're not sitting there getting sort of skeleton orders. They're getting their drips titrated. They're getting their next dose of antibiotics, their next dose of pain meds. And I'm getting that support because this process has ramped up. So we're improving patient quality and care, and also capacity and throughput in our ED. And it all kind of started with a conversation of how far can we take this?
Yeah, he kind of covered all of it.
Well, Becca, you guys use discrete event simulation, right? And some pieces of that. Share how that started and how that works and how that partnership has gone.
With the company?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's great. Like, it's always helpful when you have somebody that's kind of like at your beck and call, so to speak, on it. But I think one of the things that's the biggest part is they really can see things that we can't see. So we know our operations the best at what's happening Monday through Sunday, 24 hours a day. But when you look at how do you look at that data and being able to depict it and really being able to bring that forward, it really helps tell the message. As I've sat in a lot of budget meetings this week, which is not the funnest time, is really being able to have that information to really tell that story remains critical. And if you don't have it currently at your institution, I really encourage you to spend the time to learn about it and to get that in order to be able to build that relationship. I think the other side is just the buy-in, being able to have our nursing colleagues, being able to have our physician colleagues and our administrators sitting at the same table, along with our AI group, is really being able to help move situations. My favorite email I get every single week is every Monday when it shows that we moved 40 patients this week, and at the end of the month, I know we're going to have 180. There's nothing else that hits my inbox that has as much success as this program has, and really being able to know that we're providing that transitional care for our patients is critical. And there's no press gaining survey that shows any of that either.
Nice. So, Dr. Slovis, so when you look at your institution's AI initiatives, what are some of the early successes and failures that sort of shaped how you approach, your strategy to rolling out these AI initiatives, particularly in the emergency department?
So I think, like most other organizations, except for those really on the bleeding edge, we consider ourselves still in the infancy, infancy of real application of AI. So it's hard to quantify some of the successes, but we definitely have had some failures. I think most people on Epic implemented the sepsis predictive model and then soon found that it absolutely did not have an impact in the emergency department. Questionable, the jury's out on whether or not. Huh? A different impact, yes.
Yeah.
So we ran it in the, and I should say that this was work done before my time at Temple, but still meaningful work. So looking at that, we've transitioned to a different process. We are very interested in looking at sepsis version 2 coming from Epic. For those not on Epic, I'm sorry, you don't know what I'm talking about. But the application in the emergency department for that, the jury is still out as well. However, from the standpoint of success, we have a lot of things coming down the pike that I think are going to have an application on overall hospital throughput, which is going to have a meaningful impact on the emergency department. So we are looking with vendors at throughput processes really to help us identify patients that are through their care continuum might be missing something that the vast majority of similar patients have. So for instance, if a patient is supposed to have potentially a 3 to 4 day hospital stay, and 99% of those patients have had an echo, and the patient on hospital day 4 still doesn't have an echo, that's an important piece of clinical information for us to then route through our care continuum team to the clinical providers. It might not be pertinent, and we certainly don't want to push them to get studies that they would not otherwise get. But if we can find barriers to throughput, that would be a valuable thing for hospital throughput times, which would ultimately lead to downstream impacts on the emergency department. So we're actively looking at processes and doing analysis of tools like that right now.
Excellent. Thank you. Our next set of questions are framed a little bit more around some of the challenges, pitfalls in learning with AI implementation. So this first one, we'll start off with you, Joe, but it's open to the entire group. And so we think a lot about AI as a tool to improve efficiency, right? But it also does a lot of other things. It can reshape roles, expectations, workflows. And given all of your experience with AI implementation, including using it for system modeling, frontline engagement, Joe, for you, even content creation, how have you seen these dynamics evolve?
Yeah, I would say I see it as a tool to try and teach people how to solve their pain points. Like even not just throughput metrics, like thinking about like my frontline nurses giving handoff and like how can I engage them on a topic. We know we care about team steps in my organization. Okay, so you can put those principles into a prompt and say, all right, this is the ED nurses experience. How can we create some sort of engagement format via Teams in which our handoffs are more collegial, they are SBAR, they share the right information, and I really like work alongside essentially educating my frontline people how they can use their ChatGPT accounts, like literally teaching them the tool in order to solve things, and I feel like that drives engagement in a different way. Whereas like there's a lot of people in my hospital who are always thinking that I'm going after them to replace their job, like my social workers, because I can probably get an algorithm to navigate our very complex California insurance system in terms of, I serve an 80% Medicaid population, which is a disposition nightmare. In terms of my complex discharge patients, like 7% of my patients take up 50% of my bed days. And it's because a lot of SNFs, a lot of rehabs don't want to take our Medicaid population. And our social workers are overworked. And so I've put in our hospitalists and our leadership made a lot of algorithms. And so I've now given it where then our frontline people, like our doctors and our residents, can put something in and get the algorithm to do the work for them that otherwise they just don't have like the capacity or the bandwidth. Because like, does a resident really need to become a social worker? No, but for our system to work with the minimal number of people, it's how can I empower people to solve those things? And so I would say that's probably been the most rewarding thing. And it's not so much like hitting a metric. It's so much as like, can I get rid of your pain point? And then when I come out with a new SOP, they're probably likely to listen to it because I first solved one of their pain points.
Great. Anyone else have any thoughts on that piece, particularly focused on how it reshapes roles, expectations, workflows, those secondary impacts?
Yeah, I think that, I think focusing on AI and its application in operational efficiency is really a great way to focus on things. We saw during the opening statements today, the Bill Gates quote that, doctors are not going to be, there's going to be obsolete in the next 10 years. And I think we can all agree from what we've seen so far that that is very far from the truth. There are some roles that are probably going to change. But when we look at some of the applications, especially with generative AI, when we look at our rev cycle people and all of this case management and people, we are actively looking at generative AI tools to help draft refusal letters for our patients. I mean, that's a huge application that takes many, many human hours that could reduce the overall time spent combing the chart, improve the overall efficiency and accuracy of those documents, which theoretically will lead to improvements overall in the downstream impact of getting patients out of the hospital, which again trickles down to the emergency department.
Anything from Becca or Alan on this? No? Ben, you saved that. You're up again. And I love what you just talked about too, because decreasing administrative burden is huge, right? What a big driver of what we want to do in so many ways. And this next question is about kind of this garbage in, garbage out kind of concept, right? With you're only as good as what comes into the AI model. And how do you mitigate those risks like bias and data quality gaps to maintain, the value of the AI model?
It's a really interesting question, and you kind of have to divide it between whether you're looking at a generative AI tool or a predictive model that's running off of discrete data. So with a vendor-based tool, it's a very difficult application because their proprietary information is their model. And asking to look under the hood is basically saying, show me the goods before we pay you. So very few vendors, if any, are willing to show you that, which is interesting because when you think about any kind of research study, any validated research that's been externally validated, they always display the data that they use to generate their results, but vendors don't do that. So for us, one of the key components of our future state with AI and working with third-party vendors is going to be in our contractual obligation negotiations, demanding that there be a period of time where we get to test the application, maybe not in the real world, but at least run it on our own data, and demanding a 6 to 12 month out if it doesn't demonstrate the outcomes that we're looking for, both on the clinical aspect, but also if there's any kind of unexpected outcomes with that. With regards to the initial analysis, we are standing up our AI governance committee. And part of that is making sure that we have compliance, and we haven't yet identified a person yet, but having someone either with a foundation in ethics or an ethicist to participate in the review of any third-party applications we're looking at, to make sure that we aren't missing something as the clinicians and technologists that would otherwise have an inappropriate impact on certain patient populations. And we've seen this. So we have to be careful. But unfortunately, I think by virtue of how these models are created, there's always going to be some inherent bias. We have to identify it and figure out how the impact affects our patients and mitigate the use if we have to.
I love that. Thanks. Anybody else from the panel want to discuss or share anything on it?
I think, kind of to tag along with that, somebody's got to jump in on this a little bit, right? Like, you got to prove that it works, you have to take the chance that it's not going to work. And so, when I got approached last spring, I thought, I don't have anything to lose here in terms of seeing if this predictive modeling could actually help us, right? We had a decent process. It was pretty, well established, pretty good kind of parameters around it, and we had really good data around it that we could plug in, to the modeling. And so I didn't see a downside, and I thought it was like a great kind of guinea pig experiment to look at. And then now that it's been successful, I think it's that success has caused others to actually stop and turn their heads and look and see, maybe, how can this help me? How can we use this in our department or our area of interest to really, gain leverage and get some momentum?
So as we're looking at integrating these AI tools into the clinical workflow, and obviously with anything operational, there is sort of the implementation science, the change management factors that go in, whether you're introducing a new workflow that has AI or not. And this is going to be a question for all the panelists, but maybe want to start with Dr. Cherney and Dr. Urban. Of even with the best AI tools, change is hard, and so how do we kind of engage our frontline staff, like, and not just our attendings, our residents, but nurses, techs, APPs, everyone involved in the emergency department, HUCs, health unit coordinators, everybody, in sort of trusting some of the AI tools that we roll out, and engaging with them sort of in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I think one of the first thing is just really being able to build a common deck. And I think when you start at that common foundation, you really need to make sure that people understand, like, their jobs are not being taken away. That's the first time when you go ahead with a technology, is there a way that we're going to do this faster, kind of thing? And we might be able to do it faster, but the idea that jobs are going to be eliminated from that is usually not part of the conversation. And I think the other side of it is really being able to understand, what is the outcome of this? What are we trying to do? And for me, I take the approach on making sure everybody knows where our finish line is, rather than trying to take a moving target. I think when people can see where you're trying to go, they're more willing to build into it and being able to see. I think the other side of it is also in relation to some of the comments about, like, garbage in, garbage out. If people know how we're going to utilize our data, what data we're pulling from, and that we trust the data that we're going to use, and they can see tangible outcomes. One thing we're doing right now is, might happen at your institution, but mysteriously all of our beds come dirty at the same time, and then they all become clean at the same time. I hear a little chuckles, so your institution might be the same. So part of that is really being able to work with our EVS colleagues, work with our nursing colleagues and our bed management colleagues, and what is that data, being able to reflect it. And it's not about pointing fingers or looking at one side. We all have the same common goal, is to being able to get that patient out of the ED who might have been there for 36 hours or 48 hours and up to the floor. And when we can utilize that equipment, it takes the emotion out of it. The moment you can separate the emotion to the facts and the figures, I think is really your best opportunity.
I mean, I think any any change is hard, right? Anytime you change a protocol, a procedure, a policy, whatever it may be, and you need to get buy-in from your stakeholders. This is a new technology, but I think like any change, it kind of requires the same steps to get people on board. When I look at when I make any change or try to gain some steam with any initiative that I'm implementing, I'm always looking through the lens of quality and safety and patient care, and that's why we're here, right? We're here to take care of the patients. We want to take better care of them. We want to be able to take care of more of them, a higher quality fashion, et cetera. And so if we talk about using this technology to improve that mission of taking good care of patients, I found that I get a lot of buy-in. Like Becca said, we're not here to replace jobs. We're trying to actually make them easier or have you do tasks that are more in line with what you train to do and what you want to do, right? Instead of some of these clerical tasks that you would hope that somebody else would do, or maybe a technology will do for you. And so I always try to figure out how I can approach each stakeholder with this is how this I hope is going to help you, and how I hope it's going to improve your workflow and allow us to work together better to take care of patients.
So change management is hard, right? That's why there's an entire field dedicated to it.
Yes.
I'm thinking informatics. We're probably thinking informatics,
Exactly.
but other people
Completely.
might be thinking of something else. But the point is that change management is hard. So I just want to reiterate that whether you call them KPIs or OKRs, showing your objectives to the end users and then however you approach it, but building a movement. And if anyone's ever seen the YouTube video of the dancing, building a movement, I highly recommend you go watch it because it's what I think about every time I'm trying to get people to change something. But demonstrating the impact and then using that to refute any contradiction is really critical. So as an example, we are using a predictive model to help manage patients with diabetes in the hospital. When we went live at our flagship hospital, there was a lot of people who said, I know how to manage diabetes. Some computer can't tell me how to manage diabetes. I know how to manage glycemic control, despite the fact that our hypoglycemic rates were abysmal compared to many of our competitors. And a core group of people said, you're going to hurt patients. The data definitively refuted that. And when we showed them the data and then showed them iteratively over time that some of the loudest people actually showed the most improvement when they adhered to the tool, complete buy-in.
Yeah, I feel like everyone's kind of hit on the same point of like trying to show frontline workers what's in it for them. Like what is the value add to them first and then following up. But AI is not going to replace bad operating procedures, bad policies, people not being held accountable. Like it doesn't fix those problems. Like, I'll tell you one of my sister hospitals, we were talking about how we differentiate patients based on ICU, PCU, telemetry, and our med-surg level. And I recently found out they tried to bring over a policy to our shop which showed that their med-surg criteria I brought in front of my hospitalist had things like you can't have a sodium less than 132. You can't have like this lab value. This lab value has no clinical thing. But that is why they're boarding at this hospital so badly, because there's a nursing culture that no one's even tried to address. And like AI wasn't going to figure that out. It was happened just to be in a meeting when this person came up to me to try and initiate at my institution because we were talking about asymptomatic hypertension treatment on the floor. And then they gave me this and they're like, oh, well, this is why our blood pressure over 180 can't be med-surg. And I was like, they're on dialysis or name all the other frustrating reasons we get in that argument. But yeah, it's being exposed to things like that, making me realize like unless you're engaged in the front line, you can actually see those things. Like AI is not going to solve those sort of bad operating procedures and policies that also are hidden roadblockers to our boarding in the ED.
Thank you all. We're just reflecting in real time on the amount of pearls that are being dropped right now. It's incredible. So there are probably several folks in attendance today that are really interested in incorporating these tools into their contexts, and maybe they're meeting some resistance. So I'm curious from your all's perspective, how do we as emergency physicians and leaders in our departments make the best business case for these AI-driven tools to the C-suite to ensure both the clinical and operational buy-in that we need? And let's start with Alan and Becca, and then we can go around the table.
All right. Well, as a person who signs a lot of the checks for these products, first thing I would say is just have your story together. I think not one administrator at this point kind of goes to bed without thinking about length of stay and throughput, and then we give everybody a KPI and OKR about how to solve it. What we don't usually do well is that we don't give you the resources to then go get a product to actually help you solve it. Because it can't be done individually. I think one of the biggest parts on this is really being able to what really want it for our team is really being able to tell that story of how is this going to create capacity. We're not going to see our ED volumes increase by 6 or 10% kind of thing. Those days are gone. We're hanging out at like the 1.9%, the 2.5% on lucky days. So those volumes are not going to change, but we have to figure out how we can move not just the ED and their strength in numbers. How does surgery work? How does hospital medicine? How do we allow people to get discharged from the hospital? And maybe it's not, for us, it's not discharging out of TJUH, but it's discharging out of Methodist for right place, right location, right area. And to do that, we really need to have those products. And I think just in the storytelling is important, being able to show where those volumes are going to go. For me, it's really being able to walk around with Alan and our other providers. Get your C-suite out of the C-suite. Bring them down, have one-on-ones. A lot of them really have good ideas and how they want to do that, but they need to see it in what's understanding. It's not watching another episode of Pitch or anything like that. It's being able to get down there and see what's happening. I do some of my rounding at 11 o'clock and earlier in the mornings and really being able to see what is happening to help that story tell. When we're recently having, of course, unfortunately, a lot of like workplace violence, like really being able to have that story and have those direct conversations will not ever be captured in a spreadsheet or a survey or anything like that. And so I think just getting your C-suite with you out of their offices and with you will help being able to make that story. Last thing I would say is there's always strength in numbers. There's nothing more than I like, honestly, is really being able to have 3 or 4 other providers who have came together. Alan does a fantastic job of working across our dyads with hospital medicine and our other observation units. Is when I'm hearing the same story from 3 or 4 different areas of how can this be done. This isn't just the ED show. This isn't just the hospital medicine show, but really being able to tell that whole story. And then I bring them with me because they're a lot smarter than me to be able to explain it to everybody else.
Yeah, the other thing, excuse me, I think that's been helpful with is since we can do this predictive modeling, I think a lot of you are in the same position. We're always asking for resources, new equipment, new stuff. Another CAT scanner, we would like one too. Now, we can use our data to sort of actually create a predictive model. It's like, what if we got a second CT scanner? How would that improve our throughput? We can model that, and then I can prove that it's going to pay for itself in a year or a year and a half and on a 10-year life. That was much harder to do previously. It took much longer and more work and computations to show that if you give me this resource, I can actually feed your bottom line over the life of this device or scanner or whatever, based on our current volumes. Notwithstanding that, well, if our wait times go down, word gets around the city, maybe our volumes go up and we have more customers, more throughput, and more utilization of those resources, and the return is even better. And I think that being able to demonstrate that with like really good data and projects that have worked in the past and have proven the effectiveness of this tool going forward is going to be a great way for us to leverage asking for resources that we need.
I'll start off by saying that my executive leadership is completely bought into AI, so it's not that hard to convince them overall. What's really hard is figuring out where we're going to allocate our resources because there's so many things coming. But that being said, when discussing applications and how we're going to do something and leverage whatever financial stuff we have to pay for it, again, it comes down to 2 big questions, which is what's our bottom line of what we're trying to impact, whether it's hypoglycemic rates or whatever. And then what's the problem we're trying to solve? And it's my favorite question is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? We have a lot of people who are chasing shiny objects who, when you ask that question, don't have a tangible answer. And guess what? Those are the very first projects to get thrown out the window. Meanwhile, the next question is, when we're trying to solve this problem, is AI actually an applicable solution? And there's a lot of products that all of a sudden have AI in their description when 10 years ago it's the same product doesn't have AI in it, right? So we have to have people who truly understand what the tool is and the problem it's trying to solve and the ultimate outcomes. When you need to, I think discussing this with your executive leadership and trying to demonstrate the OKRs is really where you can leverage that understanding of the problem and then convince them that this is a good application. And again, most importantly, from my perspective, when you're working with a vendor, and I should say also, look at the resources that you have, whether you're on Epic or Cerner or Allscripts, whatever EHR you are on. Most of these EHR companies are looking for solutions. They might not be the best, but you might have paid for it already. And then if you're going to go with a third-party vendor, you have to have that out so that if it ends up being that the product did not prove what it was going to do, you're done.
Great points. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we want to ask one more question about kind of future strategies, vision, and then we want to open up to the audience for any questions that they have for the panel. So this is that what if question, right? What does this look like in 5 years? What are some real pearls and pitfalls and some risks with these opportunities that you advise ED leaders to prepare for the future?
Sure. So it's really interesting to think about where we're going to be in 5 years, because 5 to 10 years ago, I remember talking in my fellowship and saying, one day the room's going to be listening and you're just going to talk to your patient in the emergency department. You're going to go sit down at your computer and your note's going to be done. I was only wrong about the fact that it's the room not listening. It's your phone. Couldn't have seen that coming. But my point being that, like, there's actually kind of a clear roadmap of where things are going with some of this. And so we shouldn't be too surprised. I think that ambient voice is really going to take off in the emergency department with regards to just the bringing the love back to clinical medicine. And I think that's going to have downstream impacts. If you know that you don't have to leave and chart for the next 2 hours after your shift because all of your notes are at least drafted, you're going to be willing to see that next patient. I'm piloting it right now, and I will tell you, at least subjectively to me, I'm willing to go see that next patient. So I'm really excited about how that's going to play a role. I think that predictive modeling and machine learning with regards to algorithms that are trained on your local data is going to have a profound impact. We know that some of these predictive models don't end up having the accuracy that we thought they were going to when they are externally used. But when you can train those models on your own data, you're going to increase that accuracy, which theoretically will help in diagnosis. There's going to be elements also with regards to charting and creating that discrete data and reducing the garbage in for the garbage out that I think is going to have a profound impact on all of this. Right now, honest show of hands in the room, how many of you actually open up the physical exam macros and click through all the boxes or use your macros? Yeah, see, nobody does, right? So one person does. So there's no discrete data driving all of the precision predictive models that we hope to implement one day. Well, if you're going to use ambient voice or you're going to free text your notes, and we have very good NLP that's able to actually create the discrete data points from what you're writing and file those away, now we're driving accurate decision support. We're driving accurate predictive models. We're seeing a future where you can do the workflow as you want, and the computer can still interpret that information and assist you in the process, which will overall improve the quality of care we provide and all of the metrics that the C-suite cares about.
So I think this is coming. It's going to be incorporated into our workflows one way or another. And I think the sooner we kind of get on board with that and accept that it's happening, and we can then sort of move to the next phase of how do we leverage it to do what we want it to do, right? If we come to it later, you're going to have less input in how that works. And so I found, that being kind of on the early side of this and sort of experimenting with it, I'm being able to influence with how we use these tools and apply them clinically and go forward with them. I think I agree with Ben. I mean, we're talking about piloting that software as well for some of our attendings and patient encounters and seeing if that'll improve our workflows. But yeah, I foresee, if we adopt this early in a way that we can then use it and leverage it in its infancy to do what we want it to do, and how we can take some of those burdens of documentation and stuff that have taken the joy out of patient care away, actually might be a huge benefit.
Yeah, I think on an innovation standpoint, one thing that could really utilize AI really well is the ED waiting room. And so if you think about in the same way that it has been done in the surgical arena, is being able to have cameras in the operating room, being able to look at throughput opportunities, being able to look at quality and being able to watch that tracing. If you can train cameras and mics to look on patients who are getting agitated for waiting, how can you reduce workplace violence in those situations by being able to see that sooner? How can you see that patient who is starting to get up that there's an alert that occurs that you can go out and get that patient before they're walking out the door, or being able to have any type of remote monitoring. That stuff is all going to exist in some different areas. It exists obviously on our watches, kind of thing, when you see your heart rate going up. But being able to have a camera that can have a central monitoring system to track patients who maybe going into a cardiac episode sooner rather than later, that you can see that coming, I think is really going to be helpful when you look at a really busy ED waiting room.
I will say in 5 years, at least the organization I work for, the Department of Health Services, I will be very lucky to have any AI. We're currently $4 billion in the hole, and we were going to be, Microsoft Copilot. I was in meetings with that, and it was a lot of downtown people with minimal. I was the only doctor representative. I've been attending for 2 years, and that was for DHS. And the only reason I say that is we need more of us involved in the development of these and more frontline staff. And for an organization like mine, maybe it's not fiscally possible, but that doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities for it to get into our workplace. I'll tell you, I got into operations because I built interpreter systems, mainly in New Orleans. I've worked in Parkland. I've worked in LA, serve a large limited English proficiency population. And we deal with a lot of health literacy. I do think there's a lot of ways in which we can do simultaneous interpretation. How do we reach these patients at their home? And that we're going to see more health equity work. I know this is an ops talk, but I think we all in the ED see this. And I think there's a million different ways this tool can be used to reach patients and make the patient experience better, which we all wish we had the time, just like Ambien. But are we going to be able to do that when they leave the ER? And that's I think really the future is going to be have personalized care that AI is driving in order to reach those patients that we know fall through the cracks.
Yeah, that's really exciting stuff. So we'll take some questions. I see Judd has his hand up. So please say your name and where you're working, and then
Well, you already said my name. I'm still Judd. I'm at Jefferson, and I'm going to ask a question to the audience behind me, and I'm not going to turn around. Ben could tell me if I got it wrong. How many of you have somebody at your institution that solved your problems for you without you asking? Right? I'm betting no hands are up, right? We need to drive this, and I think it's really important. But we talk about AI like it's one thing. It's not one thing. It's 10 million things. It's like talking about a doctor. It's like sending you to the psychiatrist when you have a brain tumor. It's not the right place. And so we need to be really focused with the problems that we have, and we've talked about some of them. And so I think, you discussed about some areas to focus, but I have really a comment for Ben and see how others are approaching it, is you have to see under the hood before you sign a contract. You actually have to. It's a federal regulation that the health system is held accountable, that the AI tool has no bias, not the vendor. So you have no idea if the vendor dealt with that. So we actually, at least the last administration and probably the next administration, and Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday of this administration, have an obligation to actually make sure there's not a bias in it. So it shouldn't be a difficult negotiating thing, and it's a critically important negotiating thing. And I think that all of these companies are very, early on, and we should quit paying them boatloads of money for a product that they don't even know if it goddamn works or how to do it. And they all lie through their teeth and tell you, we could develop this with you. If they're developing with you, that's called a development deal. And it shouldn't be a vendor-vendee relationship. So I'm supposed to ask a question. So how many of you have development deals?
We're starting. We didn't before I got there. Now we're working on it.
Not on the ED side, but we do in some of our other areas, such as the OR.
Not even close. And Judd, your comment about the under the hood, you're right? And we should be able to see the data they use to both train and validate their models. The problem is that half the time they're not even confident in the information that they use to train and validate their models.
Hence the development deal.
Correct.
Yes. Hello. Hi, my name is Sacha Massacoin-Melli. I'm at Emory University. Love everything you all have said. Lots of pearls. I really like what you said about the engagement. I can totally see that. And we are implementing we have ambient listening, and it's making a huge difference in our shop and even changing the way we care for patients. The question I have is for Rebecca and for Alan. Now, what you had said is that your predictive modeling tool then allows you to go to your C-suite and ask for more resources. And my understanding from what you described is that you now have this transitional care service. You have a 24/7 ambulance that can do these transfers. And that is based on the predictive modeling tool. My question is, pre the AI tool, you had a system that you said was okay. Could you have gone to the C-suite and saying we need more resources, and then had these additional resources and still have similar results to what you're getting minus the AI tool? Because you have a lot more support now that was brought by the AI tool, but I wonder if you had that support with what you had before, whether you'd also be seeing a big difference.
Good question.
I think it's a little bit of a hard question to answer, right? Because hindsight's 2020, and we are where we are. I think we may have gotten there more slowly and had to have some more negative outcomes and incidents to get to the positive stuff. But being able to show that we had a pretty robust and concrete transfer process in place, and saying, look, we need resources to now scale this. Like, the process is good, we just need more resources thrown at it. And we were kind of on the cusp really of it just sort of blowing open and really getting the transfer numbers up. I think that was really the straw that pushed them to go, okay, we're gonna actually give this to you and try it. And at first it was a pilot. I mean, I think the extra crew was maybe 8 weeks or something like that for the transfers, but it instantly helped, because what was happening was our transfer turnaround times on mean were 8 hours for a transferred patient to go 2 miles down the street, right? That sucks. We're down to about 4.5 now, but getting that down makes more people comfortable with it, right? Which gets people to do it more. So it's buy-in from my team, right? Saying, well, it's safe to transfer patients because they're not going to wait as long. So it all kind of feeds on itself. And I think the last thing was getting someone to write a check for something we couldn't quite prove yet. But as soon as we implemented it, it had an impact that was as predicted, and it's just kind of been on autopilot ever since. And then the transitional care is now, as a result of so many of these patients going, you're going to have fallouts. And right now we don't have dedicated FTE for that. But in the 2 months that we've had it at all levels of care here, I haven't heard of a single patient safety event related to a transfer. I had 12 in the prior 6 months, so every other week. So if I can bring that and say, look, in a couple of months, safety events are gone as a result of this, I can probably get them to fund those positions, separately. There's a bit of a luck, and I think you have to have that success to prove that it works. But if you do the homework and you have a system in place that's effective and has good stakeholders and people from all sides bought into it, then you can use the modeling to kind of say, look, we need this, and on a provisional basis, we could prove that it works.
Can we get one more? Yeah.
Time for one more.
Hi, I'm Tareem. I'm faculty, does operations informatics work at Mount Sinai Hospital. I'm particularly curious, I think we touched upon AI governance, and I know this work is ongoing, right? I mean, there's a reason why this panel is happening, but are there some existing frameworks that you've developed or recommend when you're thinking about data integrity, data selection, in terms of how it could impact model development? And then to Joe's excellent point about patient-facing outputs, so I'd be curious to learn more based on your expertise. Thank you.
I mean, not yet. That's kind of as we adopt these tools, I think there's going to be more of that. I mean, we obviously have a hospital ethics committee. I assume it's probably going to have something to do with that, or be sort of a subcommittee on AI. I know, so I also teach evidence-based medicine at the medical college, and that's a question I've gotten about AI and the curriculum that we've met about as well. So these things, are not mutually exclusive, have some overlap, but I think there's, when we talk about the next 5 years, as we are going to be faced with this technology and its implementation, we're going to need to rapidly come up with governance structures about how we adopt and use it and how we vet these products, et cetera.
Validated frameworks, not to my knowledge. Lots of people are, at every single, Zoom meeting for CMIOs I go to now, everyone's talking about their AI governance structure and how theirs is better than everybody else's. So I imagine that we'll probably have an archetype that works in the future, but obviously it's going to be necessary to validate it for your own organization and how your organization runs. I can tell you that we're already 6 months into our AI governance committee drastically changing how it works, because we had our first IRB proposal come through the AI committee and realized that we did it completely inappropriately. So we're fixing it, but trial by fire here. With regards to data integrity, obviously part of that is working with your data scientists and whoever's managing your data lake or your lake house, which is a new term for me. That's a real thing. But I think part of that is, again, validating what discrete variables you have and how you're working with your data scientists. I can tell you that we are trying to fix one of the simplest problems, which is we have, I think, 3 or 4 different variables labeled length of stay. And we have absolutely no idea which one is the right. Actually, that's not true. We do know which is the right one, but the end users that are doing queries don't actually know which is the right one. So, part of the data integrity process is just making sure that your terminologies are appropriate and consolidating those things, which is a huge undertaking, especially for many organizations that have decades of data now that they're trying to consolidate to leverage. So, don't have a great answer other than it's going to take a lot of human hours to oversee. AI might help.
Well, thank you all so very much. We're going to move this conversation outside the room to make way for the next session, but thank you all so much.